Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Hustlefreewealth. This is part two of our podcast with Mr. Gajendra Kothari from Etica Wealth. In this episode, we dive deep into topics like asset allocation, building all weather portfolio, smart debt strategies, and much more. If you haven't watched part one yet, the link is available in the comments and description. Make sure to check it out for the full context. As always, please consult a qualified financial advisor before making any kind of investment decisions. Let's proceed to the video now. Okay, so how do you check the valuation of the mutual funds that you're going to invest in? So let's say if there is a new mutual fund and if the underlying stocks in it are overvalued. Obviously, we don't get the data real time. We get it after a month. The fund manager could have made changes. But then we do look at those things and make decisions. So do you also do that or you don't do that at all? You leave it on
Uh,
the fund manager.
yeah, I generally leave it to the fund manager, but see what happens, being a part of professional, we get to interact with fund managers almost every second day, third day, fourth day. There are con calls that happens. There are monthly meets, there are physical events we get to participate. And because you talk to many fund managers, you get some idea about who is bluffing, who is giving you this thing. And because of our experience of 20 years and because you can meet them in private, you can ask tough questions to them. And there are times where fund managers to an open public or an open podcast can't tell you exactly black and white. But in person, they are much more forthcoming because they know you very well. They can say, yes, I'm feeling really bubble in this space, or I'm feeling really this thing. You can pick up, their intelligence from there. So this is a network effect because you built a network of around this for the last 10 years. That helps. That they all become a sounding board for you to make decisions, right? So we try and use all of this. We discuss with our colleagues, we discuss within our team, and then we form an opinion कि हाँ ये इसमें जाना चाहिए कि नहीं जाना चाहिए. By and large, we've been right. Few times we also, even after doing all this research and all this drama and everything, you still go wrong because markets are unpredictable.
No, the reason why I asked this question is because most of the investors, what they do is they look at the funds that have performed recently. That recency bias is always there. And they
Right.
want to just start investing in that. At least if they have just one check more wherein they can look at the valuation before they get into that, I think that was going to really help them,
Uh,
isn't it?
See, I'll tell you, Pankaj. I mean, not because I'm an advisor. I'm saying uh, in 95% of the case, this this game can't be played long term in a DIY format. Matlab, do it yourself. You won't believe this is my full time job. 24/7, I'm only reading, understanding, consuming finance, personal finance all the time. Right? Somebody like you who is see, you're doing out of interest. Because you have passion. That's why you would also be going much beyond your way and reading in this thing. But just talk to people in your circle. They have other jobs to do. They have a full time job. They have other things to manage, right? So if they're not spending time in understanding and doing this, they may go wrong they may go right in 3 cases, but in 2 cases they go wrong. All the alpha that they've generated by trying to become expert they lose that in those two wrong calls, right? So and that's why I'm trying to say कि आप चाहे वो एडिशन लेयर भी आप रिसर्च कर लो कि पोर्टफोलियो का वैल्यूएशन क्या है. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's not in science. There's a lot of art in managing the portfolio. What we are trying to talk is science part of the portfolio कि अगर P इतना है तो इतना नहीं करना चाहिए. But science only works well in physics and chemistry because all 1,000 times when you do the experiment, the results will be same when inputs and outputs are the same. But this is a human game. Can you imagine same stock, one fund house is buying and one fund house is selling the same stock. So how do you really, and in only hindsight, you will know कि एक right था और एक wrong था.
True.
So all these things can go out of the window. मतलब, it doesn't really help.
Okay. Next question is about people having too many funds in their portfolio. What is the best way to trim other than some of the common ones that we know, that when markets are down at that time sell the funds that you don't want, or sorry, go ahead.
नहीं, आपने एकदम सही कहा. I have too many funds in the portfolio. It was never a conscious choice, but because आपने buy call, almost all the funds have done very well. We have made very good returns in all the funds that we bought. But sell नहीं कर पाए because हमें कभी ऐसा मौका नहीं लगा. But you need to sell at some point of time because you can't manage this thing. So जितना मैं ज़्यादा वेल्थ में मतलब इसमें कर रहा हूँ, आई रियलाइज़ नॉट मोर देन 2 to 3 फंड्स इज़ व्हाट यू रिक्वायर एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, बिकॉज़ देन यू कैन टेक रियली गुड कॉल्स एंड गो एग्रेसिवली। आज बेचने में खाली थोड़ा-सा वो लगता है कि बहुत कैपिटल गेन्स टैक्स चला जाएगा एंड दैट पिंचेस यू। सो आई हैव बीन वेटिंग फॉर अ गुड 25% करेक्शन फॉर लॉन्ग टाइम कि एक बार आ जाए और मैं क्लीन अप कर सकूँ पूरा, जैसे दिवाली क्लीन अप होता है ना, यू गेट दिस। तो आई हैव बीन वेटिंग। ये अप्रैल में 18% करेक्शन आके रुक गया था एंड इट डिडंट गो टू 2025, बट अगर आता तो मैं काफ़ी फंड्स उसमें एटलीस्ट 30-40% ऑफ द पोर्टफोलियो आई वुड हैव ट्रिम्ड एंड reinvest the amount in the existing fund so that it looks much in shape. बट एटलीस्ट जो हम नया पोर्टफोलियो क्लाइंट्स के लिए बनाते हैं, ये जो है, तो वहाँ सिर्फ 2-3 मैक्सिमम 4 फंड्स, वी डोंट रिकमेंड बियॉन्ड दैट।
Okay, so better is not to just keep adding things in
नहीं,
your portfolio because
एंड सर्टेनली नेवर इन द सेम कैटेगरी, मतलब 2-3 मिड कैप फंड लेके कोई मतलब नहीं है, 3 स्मॉल कैप लेके कोई मतलब नहीं है। ये गलती तो कभी नहीं करना चाहिए, मतलब जनरली आपके पास ठीक है एक स्मॉल कैप हो गया, फिर आपको अभी पीएसयू अच्छा लगा तो आपने वो ले लिया, फिर आपको आईटी अच्छा लगा तो वो ले लिया, वो अलग हो सकता है बिकॉज दोज आर नॉट कोरिलेटेड। बट आप सोचते हो नहीं, मैं 3 स्मॉल कैप में डाल देता हूँ, 3 फ्लेक्सी कैप रख देता हूँ, बिकॉज वी सी लॉट ऑफ दीज रेपुटेशंस इन क्लाइंट्स पोर्टफोलियोज, इन इन्वेस्टर्स पोर्टफोलियोज ऑफ द सेम कैटेगरी। वहां तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं करना चाहिए। वन फंड पर कैटेगरी शुड बी मैक्सिमम इन माय ओपिनियन।
yes, on that I have a question. So this is true for small investors. But if somebody who has, let's say, a flexi cap fund, let's say 70-80% is there in that flexi cap fund, and it is a big corpus, shouldn't they be diversifying into another fund to manage fund house risk?
See, again, I have generally never believed in this so-called fund house risk unless it's a very small fund house. Okay, let's kind of look at top 5 fund houses of the world. जो भी है, सबके पास क्या है? They are sitting on large corpuses. They have multiple fund managers. They have multiple schemes. And आप generally देख लीजिए, all these 5 fund houses in the long term, जो भी उनके funds हैं, they will be very similar performance, because all these fund houses will not try and do anything which is very like out of the world thing, right? If you're a small fund house, you can try because you have no option but to get AUM. So आपको खोने के लिए क्या है? You have nothing to lose, right? So you will go for that extra aggressive bet. But if you're already sitting in a good corpus, you will say, boss, as long as in the long term, if I'm able to beat the benchmark by 1-2%, I'm not going to do anything extra कि मेरा fund AUM आधा हो जाए. I don't want to do anything crazy. So I generally don't believe there is a big fund house risk, and look at that, when if your money is anywhere in 50 stocks, what risk are you carrying? Even if that fund manager is a dumb person, right? As long as these are decent stocks and these are part of the mainstream index, ज़्यादा कुछ variation आता ही नहीं है. And we've seen, because of data for last 15-20 years, even worst performing equity fund in the long term has given you 10, 11, 12% kind of CAGR. Worst performing equity fund. Of course, the best one would have given 20, but क्या होता है? Neither you'll be very lucky to get the 20% right, correct call right. Neither you'll be very unlucky to get the 10% call right, 10% call wrong. You'll be somewhere in the middle, 14, 15, you know. And as you rightly said, आपके पास अगर हम ये थियोरेटिकली बात करें कि एक कैटेगरी में एक होना चाहिए, बट किसी के पास होता नहीं है। सबके पास 3-4 फंड तो होते ही हैं, राइट? तो 3-4 फंड होते हैं, तो कोई एक 12% वाला भी है, कोई 15 वाला भी है, कोई 17 वाला भी है, एंड यू कम बैक टू मीन इन 90% ऑफ द केसेस।
Okay. So now, we have already talked about this, but
But just one answer I want to give. If you have few funds, na, at least what will happen as an investor, you will know your portfolio very well then. Because you have 2 to 3 funds, you will know who is the fund manager. You will start seeing their videos. You'll start following them wherever they are. You'll know their philosophy in and out. It's like, अगर आपके 2 ही बच्चे हैं तो आपको पता है कि आपको कैसे मैनेज करना है। अगर आपके 20 बच्चे होंगे तो आपको पता ही नहीं है कि उनका नाम क्या है, कौन सब एक जैसे दिख रहे हैं, किसने खाना खाया, किसने नहीं खाया, ऑल दिस प्रॉब्लम्स विल कम। बट अगर आपके 2 ही बच्चे हैं तो उनके प्रेफरेंसेस क्या है, उन्होंने कैसा किया है। एंड देन एक्सट्रीम मोमेंट्स पे आपको पता है कि आप किस फंड मैनेजर को निकालना है या किसको लेना है, तो दैट हेल्प्स।
okay. So next question, though we have already talked about this, but I still want to continue. It is an important subject for most of the investors. See, asset allocation is very difficult. We have already established it, and most of the people don't do the rebalancing. And the major resistance is that tax. So, can investors just go with hybrid mutual funds or multi asset mutual funds and just continue with that, right? If they
Yeah,
don't want to.
for a large part of investors, I would strongly recommend them because this is like a buy and hold approach. आपको दिमाग नहीं लगाना. Let two reasons. Let the fund manager take the call on asset allocation, and secondly, you don't pay tax. उसमें भी दो है. If you want to play multiple assets, then there are multi asset funds, gold, silver, equity, debt, REIT भी आ गया. Your expectation should be FD plus 2% returns. Don't become greedy. Suppose if FD is giving 7, maybe 9 to 10% return should be expectation in a multi-asset fund. Don't look for 12% return from those. अगर आया तो luck है, नहीं आया तो ठीक है. Always have that lower expectation. If you are going into a hybrid fund, you can go with an aggressive hybrid fund strategy because this category of fund has a very longest track record of 25 years. And they are 65% equity and 35% debt. In a growing country like India, or आपको at least India पे faith है next 15-20 years, then you don't mind having that 15% extra exposure to equity, like 65 equity and 35 debt to cushion the fall and opportunity. So if you do that, so if 10% is your expectation in a multi-asset fund, so in a aggressive hybrid, again, you can have 10 to 11, somewhere between that range, right? 10 to 12. That is very good for 80% of the investors because think this 80% of the investors were anyway very comfortable putting money in FDs in India. They were happy with 6-7% return. तो यहाँ पे 3 या 4% extra है. And I'll tell you why they will create wealth in this process. Because these funds have lesser volatility compared to pure equity funds. By default, they would have remained invested because it doesn't give them scary, this thing, a view. और अगर 5 साल निकाल लिया तो एक बार CAGR, the portfolio is reflecting the CAGR. The value has 1 lakh has become, let's say, 2 lakh or 3 lakh over a period of time. Then उसके बाद खराब performance doesn't show because the fund is holding up. And as a result, it will stay even longer there. और उसी चक्कर में wealth बन जाएगा. You know what happens? Most people exit in the first 6 months or 12 months because they see negative returns or flat return. But if your 1 lakh has become 2 lakh for 5 years, or 6th year maybe 2 lakh hai, then would you exit? You won't exit because your 1 lakh is 2 lakh. So these are the mind games we all play with ourselves.
Yes, and anyway, that is good, right? Because see, if you're investing in multi-asset fund or hybrid funds, you are also investing that that fixed deposit and the equity portion also there. So basically, if you're not losing anything.
And it's the most tax efficient way.
Exactly.
It's managed by professionals. They can do the rebalancing whenever they want. And you have a good history of 25 years of all aggressive hybrid funds to see how they've done. सबसे बढ़िया exercise आपको क्या करना चाहिए? You take out all the funds, you look at the worst performing fund, aggressive hybrid fund in that 20-year period or 15-year period. You take that as a benchmark कि अगर इतना आ गया and if I'm happy with that, then you really have nothing to lose in that sense.
Yes, and many of these hybrid funds or multi-asset funds have given better returns than Nifty, plain vanilla
Yes.
Nifty.
And risk adjusted for sure, it has given much better. And in the process, what has happened, a lot of investors have created wealth because there was less volatility in these funds. And as a result, they stayed in the first 3 4 5 years. और एक बार जब 5 साल बैठे रह गए ना, because 1 लाख का 2 लाख बन गया, they now know कि अगर अब इसमें से निकालेंगे तो capital gain लग जाएगा, तो चलो चलने दो, मतलब, and then 2 has become 4 and 5 and, they've made a lot of money out there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Coming to a very important question for almost all of the investors, and on my videos, I get this question. And so, what is the best way to park money for your debt allocation?
I have a very different view of debt. Personally, मेरे portfolio में debt बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. अभी है, but it is more from a tactical point of view. If I get opportunity to invest in equity or other asset class which is much better, I would switch that. It is just a parking mechanism for me. For me, debt, and when I advise to my investors, I say debt is generally meant for short term, right? 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, maximum 3 years type. Anything beyond 3 years, then you have other revenues like hybrid or multi-asset or equity savings. जहाँ पे you can make better tax efficient returns. So that is why I'm very much against PPF, EPF kind of vehicles personally. And that's a very controversial statement because a lot of advisors and a lot of other people say this is the best debt allocation, best. I agree it's the best debt allocation, but to me, this is like saying ki in the sedan car, I've chosen the best car in the sedan, and with this sedan car, I'll go from Mumbai to Jammu and Kashmir. I would have rather chosen an SUV, which is not the best of SUV, uh, because the distance is very long, right? The mode of vehicle makes a lot more sense rather than you're choosing the best in that category. So people give this example कि नहीं debt में इससे बढ़िया option क्या है? I know it's a good option. It's tax free. PPF is tax free, or your EPF is guaranteed 8%. But was 15 साल में सबसे खराब से खराब equity fund has given 12% CAGR. सबसे खराब. If you're the unluckiest investor, right, you've still earned 12% on many periods on rolling returns. I'm not saying point to point also, right? तो फिर why should I put my money in PPF or EPF for long term? Having said that, अगर 3 साल का पैसा 2 साल का पैसा है, generally I prefer debt funds for many reasons. Uh, अब तो ये एक कैटेगरी है डेट फंड में, डेट इनकम प्लस आर्बिट्राज, जिसमें you get that kind of a, after 2 year you get equity taxation. Otherwise in normal debt fund, now there is no short term long term, pay full tax. But if there is this debt income FOF, 2 साल अगर आपने होल्ड किया, then you get 5% long term capital gain. So अगर शॉर्ट टर्म है, मतलब 1 2 3 years है, and I don't want to pay through equity, then I'm happy to send 8%. If I'm putting my money in debt fund, na, Pankaj, this is a very good hack for me. Returns is not the priority for me. I look in this format SLR, safety, liquidity, returns. Safety has to be first. Because if I have to make returns, I'll make returns in equity. वो आधे टके extra के लिए, because the whole game is between 1% only. Best and the worst में, right? There's not much leeway in debt funds. Debt fund में 6% रिटर्न दिया, एक debt fund ने 13% रिटर्न दिया, ऐसा नहीं होता है. The best has given 7 and the worst has given 6 in the same category. So I would go with safety, liquidity, and returns. In equity funds, I'll reverse. Liquid, well, returns first, safety is the last for me, because I'm playing that risk game anyway there. All my money, all this while in the last many years, have always been in debt funds. I don't do FDs. I don't go and invest in private bonds because I don't want any kind of lock-in. अगर आप मुझे आधा टका एक्स्ट्रा भी दे रहे हो, डबल ए बन गए. You know what thing? If I'm putting entire money in a debt fund, my money goes in 50 different companies. So if I know where my upside is limited, then I would like my downside to be protected entirely by spreading as much as possible. You're getting my point?
Yes.
Many people go and do 5 crore FD in a single bank. To me, that's the most risky thing. No matter whatever the brand is. I would rather be happy to put 5 crore in a debt fund, because that 5 crore is going to 50 such banks or companies of the same nature. कल को अगर वो एक बैंक खत्म हुआ तो my 2% money is only affected, not entire 100%, right? That's how I look at it.
Basically, you're saying that keep it in debt mutual funds, the debt portion of the allocation.
And you know, the other advantage with debt product, unlike FD or a bond, because I have no lock-in, I can withdraw partially how much I want. I can withdraw in multiple tranches, right?
Yeah.
I have a lot of flexibility there, which in an FD, that kind of flexibility is not there.
Okay. You also mentioned about keeping some cash for opportunity, right? Whenever there is an opportunity, you'll use that to invest. What about somebody keeping it in equity savings fund or arbitrage funds?
Yeah, good enough. Absolutely perfect. See, arbitrage is completely safe, but it will give you 5-6%, not more than that. Equity savings fund, again, different fund houses have different equity exposure in the equity saving funds. So the return can be as conservative as 7-8% to as aggressive as 10-11%, 12% in equity savings fund also. Because there are fund houses where, you know, in some cases the equity exposure is only 10%, and there are some fund houses where equity long exposure is 40%. So that could be both good and bad depending on what. Particularly if you are someone who is waiting for this money to be get invested in equity markets, I would suggest go in a conservative equity saving fund, so that when markets fall, your money falls less and you can put this at a much better opportunity, at that time.
Yeah. So there are funds which give you equity taxation, and they are conservative in nature also. They use the arbitrage.
all equity savings funds give you equity taxation. That is not the worry. But within equity savings funds, somebody plays very conservatively, which means they have a 10% in long equity and remaining through arbitrage. Somebody has a 40% in long equity and remaining through arbitrage. So if markets crash, that 40% equity savings fund will give you negative return or pretty badly hit, right? Because it was 40% long, even in an equity savings fund category. So the performance can be highly volatile within the same category.
No, there are some equity savings fund. For example, ICICI's equity savings fund, right? So
That is one of the conservative ones.
yes, but
Where the
again,
exposure is around 10 to 15% in long equity.
yes,
I
and if you withdraw after a year, there is that 1.25 lakh.
So Pankaj, all equity savings funds by default will get equity taxation. Because क्या होता है? So the long equities of 10%, which IC says, the remaining 50% is in arbitrage. So you add both, you become 65 equity kind of product. But in other funds, if I have a 30% exposure in long equity, I'll take 35 in arbitrage, 35 plus 30 is 65. Again, I get equity. This thing. But long equity of 30-40% is very aggressive in an equity savings fund.
I thought there were only handful which keep 65, others keep between 35 to 65. So that
In
after 2 years, I think you get that. I could be wrong. I'll have to check
no,
that.
no, in equity savings fund, the fact that after 1 year it becomes tax free, that's why almost all fund houses will keep that way, But it is an equity plus arbitrage position. It's not a long equity. It's a
Yes.
mix. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, yes. Coming to the same point. So what I do is I spend my entire expense on credit cards, and then I pay it through liquid fund. Now I'm using arbitrage, and then later on I'll be using equity savings also to do the same thing, because I wanted my money to work all the time. I heard you also do the same thing when it comes to paying your employees' salary. You keep your entire money in liquid fund, and then at the end of the month you pay it through that. So
Correct.
now, I think it is good for investors who are disciplined, but for most, it is not going to work, right? Because if you're using credit cards and then you don't have the discipline, what is your take on that?
I'm a very strict disciplinarian in that sense. I've never ever paid penalties, or I never like to revolve credit. That's the worst form of debt. So credit card, of course, you spend as much on credit card as you can, because anyway you're making payments. So why not make payment through credit card to optimize your spend, but pay entirely off much before the due date, right? That's what I always do. So I've never paid 40% interest, or I've never paid all those fines. So I'll withdraw from my liquid fund if it is personal name, or from my bank account and stuff like that. For company, see, we do investment from our company account also. So for company, it is natural to keep maybe 5 to 10% cash all times, because of what if markets are down for a good 12 months? We need to pay salaries. You have some other expenses. As far as the personal account is concerned, we draw salaries from our company. So here do a different approach. I may have very less money in liquid funds. If of course markets are expensive, I will build 5-10% cash there in liquid funds also in my personal capacity, so that when markets come down. But suppose tomorrow markets are in a very attractive zone, I will use almost all my money in my liquid fund also. And I'll tell you what, and suppose मैंने सब कुछ कर दिया and I've invested everything and I have nothing in debt fund then, right? And again, I'm not recommending this strategy to anybody, because my position is very different, because over the last 15 years, I've accumulated a lot amount of wealth. So imagine अगर मुझे उस वक्त निकालना भी पड़ा, something that I invested in 2010, if I withdraw now, that is still still up much, by a huge margin, right? So even if markets are down, if I withdraw at that level, I've still made 12, 13, 14% CAGR on that returns. So I don't have to worry कि, market down hai, कि निकालो कि नहीं निकालो, because I've been investing for such a long period of time. And anything that you invested 10, 15 years back, you bought at a very cheap price, right? So you don't really have to see the market hai ki nahi. And I'll give you example. This I learned from Ramdev Agarwal. So Ramdev Agarwal is like 5,000 crore portfolio today, right? Somebody told me Ramdev Agarwal went to buy jewelry for his children's marriage, and he bought from someone who we know, and he bought worth 5 CR. Ramdev Agarwal would have said कि एक काम करो, ये पैसा 2 दिन बाद मिलेगा आपको. So the owner was surprised. Somebody like Ramdev Agarwal saying 2 दिन बाद मिलेगा, not today. So Ramdev Agarwal said, look, I have nothing in cash. Everything is invested. I'll sell my stocks. I'll get money in T plus 2. और मैं तब आपको पैसा दूंगा. So for him, there is nothing called wedding fund कि अरे अभी liquid में रख लो और emergency fund की तो इतना माल है जो बेचूंगा और मैं आपको दे दूंगा. So I also want to be in that position tomorrow कि you have enough money and more wealth और आपने इतने टाइम से डाला है कि आप कहीं से तो निकालो, you would have made good returns and you pay off. Why keeping cash? You know. So that's that. But this sounds very good story. Not applicable for 99% of the people.
Yeah. That brings me to the next question about emergency funds. Most of the folks park their emergency fund in FDs, some in liquid funds. But this is something that most likely you're not going to use. So, does it make sense to park that money in equity savings fund or arbitrage?
So again, as I said, Naki, because this is your short-term money, and look, just try and imagine, Pankaj, this is a small portion of your entire wealth, right?
Mhm.
Because you're anyway putting 6 to 12 months of your expenses in this thing. So in your entire scheme of things, this will not be even 2% of your corpus.
Okay.
So does it really matter whether you're getting 7% or 8% or 9%? The most thing that should matter is safety, liquidity, and return. कि जब चाहिए तब मिल रहा है कि नहीं. And so to that extent, for me, liquidity is the most important requirement in that sense. Can I get in 24 hours? Right? Of course. See, there is one more way you can look at it is there are many people who look credit card as their emergency fund mechanism. And that's why that 24 window, our window doesn't rule apply. They can withdraw in 2 days time, 3 days time also. But I generally say if that is 1 or 2% of your corpus, I would not do FD because for reasons I said, I don't want to do lock-in and stuff like that. अगर FD कर दिया 1 साल का lock-in है, then there's a penalty and stuff like that, and I pay full tax. I would rather prefer a debt fund, or I don't mind. In my case, I don't mind equity savings fund also. 10% वाला equity है तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, right? So yeah, even that is fine as long as you have a 1 year view on that, and it is purely emergency kind of thing.
Okay. You have had around 15 years of experience, and then you must be dealing with a lot of investors. From your experience, what are the biggest mistakes that seasoned investors make?
Most investors who come from financial services industry, they make the biggest mistake. Those like who have, those who have finance course degrees like, CA, CFA and all, or MBA finance, or coming from any financial services background like banking or stock market and mutual funds. In fact, they are the ones who make the maximum amount of mistakes because they are overconfident. उनको लगता है मुझे तो सब आता ही है, मुझे आप क्या बताओगे? So they're not open to your discussion. And it might apply to me also because I am also CFA. What I believe, I'm still a student of the market. I learn a lot. I read a lot. Uh, I read the likes of Warren Buffett and all. And why I read those people? Because they are old enough to commit all the mistakes and you can learn straight from their journey, right? They've seen everything in their life. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch, Ramdev Agarwal. We look up to them and we get cues from them. Uh, so, and if they say that equities are the best vehicle for the long term, then फिर मैं newspapers क्या बोल रहे हैं, magazines क्या बोल रहे हैं, मुझे दिमाग नहीं लगाना है फिर, right? And they are not media influencers, right? They're the legends who have, and why I trust them, see, because they have skin in the game. उन्होंने करके दिखाया है. मैं जिन लोगों का भी बारे में आपको बात कर रहा हूँ राकेश जी, उन्होंने करके दिखाया है. They're not armchair commentators. बोलना बहुत easy है. And that's why in our company also we don't like to deal with many people who are from the financial organizations because if they're not going to listen to our advice, they will interrupt in our process. Then they're not going to make returns, and we don't want that. So the maximum mistake the seasoned people do is because they think they know it all. इनको सब पता है. And I think that is the biggest disadvantage you can.
Okay. What is an all weather portfolio, according to you? We talked about Nifty 500, Nifty 50. But is there an ideal portfolio that you think will suit people at all times? Just keep investing and forget.
See, if you are a young and if you
Sorry.
don't confuse volatility with risk, okay. Volatility is not risk. Volatility just mean up and down.
It's your friend.
Yes, a risk is permanent loss of capital to me. Volatility is, I love volatility. अगर volatility नहीं है तो मुझे मजा ही नहीं आता, right? So for me, for somebody who is young, who's starting out, I would like to say just keep things simple. If you are very aggressive, तुम सारा पैसा मान लो small cap, mid cap में डाल सकते हो और wait कर सकते हो 25 साल. Even that's not a wrong strategy, provided you stick to what you are saying. बोलना बहुत ईज़ी है कि मैं 25 साल वेट कर सकता हूँ, बट कोई करता नहीं है। तो और आपको एकदम सिम्पलेस्ट रखना है, आप एक निफ्टी 500 फंड ले लो, मार्केट ने 15% रिटर्न दिया तो आपका भी 15 आ जाएगा। And if you end up getting 15% return for 20-year period or 25-year period, you've beaten 99% of the investors on the planet. Because बाकी 99% investors ने monkey की तरह jump किया है, यहाँ से वहाँ, ये किया, वो किया, निकाल लिया है, और आपने निकाला नहीं है, तो it's like that tortoise in the hare story ना। tortoise hare confident था, वो बहुत नाटक कर रहा था, सो रहा था, इधर जा रहा था, tortoise चुपचाप चलते जा रहा था, it won the race. It applies to investing also.
Okay.
It may sound so simple कि people will not take it seriously, but this is what works.
Yeah.
Man, last 15 years, whatever the wealth I've created, lot of in these videos you might say I've done contra calls and this thing, but trust me, 95% of the wealth that I've created has come from discipline of doing SIPs at all levels, not trying to time the market कि अरे दिमाग मत लगाओ कि अभी सेंसेक्स ऑल टाइम हाई पे है और मैं 40 लाख का SIP कर रहा हूँ, अभी बंद कर देना चाहिए. You know, so I've done that discipline, and secondly, I've remained patient for the last 15 years. 10% that alpha or that kicker has come from my contrarian views or right? But bulk of the wealth has come because I sat there. I did nothing stupid. That is a recipe for the compounding that I got 16, 17% in the last 15 years. So if somebody like me who is 24 by 7 in the market and can tell you कि boss ज़्यादा दिमाग मत लगाओ, 90% returns will come from your patience and discipline, तो फिर तो मतलब और कॉम्प्लिकेट करने का मतलब ही नहीं बनता है.
Yeah. So basically, we can say doing nothing is equal to not being stupid.
That's the biggest advantage you might have in this world where everything is so much noisy.
Okay. So if you had to summarize your money philosophy in one line for our listeners, what would it be?
See, I feel money philosophy should be very simple in the sense in life, everything is about balance, right? There's no extreme views in, you know, दिन है तो रात है, तभी रात का मजा है दिन बिकॉज़ कॉन्ट्रास्ट है एंड यू नीड टू हैव बैलेंस. सुख है तो दुःख है, नहीं तो सुख का कोई वैल्यू नहीं होगा. सो फ्यूचर के लिए हम प्लानिंग करते हैं, बट प्रेजेंट में अगर नहीं जिएंगे, व्हाट इज द पॉइंट ऑफ प्लानिंग फॉर द फ्यूचर इफ यू आर नॉट एंजॉयिंग योर प्रेजेंट. Most of these podcasts, people come and tell me, sir, I want to create 100 crores wealth. I want to also have Rolls Royce, whatever. So I says, there's nothing wrong in planning, but if you're planning for future at the cost of your present, that's a questionable thing. Because future होएगा कि नहीं होगा वो भी guarantee का है. What is the guarantee कि 20 years down the line you'll be there or not? But I know for sure that you compromise your present today because you wanted to make a great future, right? So why not do a balance? आज भी enjoy करो. Have a goal-based investing, goal-based plan. If you want to buy a Mercedes car, plan for it and buy it. If you want to go for a Europe holiday, plan for it and then go and use that corpus for that. So have realistic plan, a balanced life where you are enjoying your present today and yet you are planned for your future. And finally, I would say, though you may have financial independence and stuff and what not to give you that peaceful night, but for your entire life, you should be meaningfully engaged. Because these days we see a lot of people want to become retired at 50 and says, I'll do whatever I want, I'll travel. But it looks very flashy, but आप 4 दिन में बोर हो जाओगे, right? So unless you have a purpose in life कि आपको करना क्या life में, find that purpose and do that. पैसा अपना बन जाएगा. These things what we discuss are not so rocket science. These things will all happen. ठीक है, you will end up doing few mistakes, but फिर line पे आ जाओगे. But at least if you're not enjoying what you're doing, पैसा बना लोगे, what is the point of that then?
Yeah, achieve financial independence, but not necessarily retire early.
हाँ, and even financially independence में क्या है? I'll tell you what. See, just think, Pankaj, if you're not enjoying the work that you do right now, and then there are many people says, you know what, मैं 40 तक काम कर लेता हूँ, फिर मैं, so suppose I'm 25 and I want to become financially independent at 40 and then I can do what I want, which means अगले 15 साल आप फिर घसीट रहे हो. To me, actually, that's a very, very wrong choice in life. ये स्टीव जॉब्स बोलते हैं, ये मैं नहीं बोलता हूँ. स्टीव जॉब्स बोलते हैं लाइफ एक ही लाइफ है, शॉर्ट लाइफ है, और आप 15 साल वो लाइफ जी रहे हो जो आपको काम पसंद ही नहीं है, जस्ट बिकॉज आप कर रहे हो क्योंकि आपको करना पड़ रहा है. यू हैव ईएमआई टू पे. तो मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ, आपने ईएमआई पाला क्यों था फिर आपने? दैट वाज अ रॉन्ग डिसीजन. बिकॉज एवरी डे फॉर 8 hours यू आर नॉट एंजॉइंग व्हाट यू आर डूइंग. यू नो और आप उसको 15 साल और चलाओगे thinking at 40 you'll become financially freedom, that's a bad choice. You need a good counselor to make sure कि आप transition करो। एसआईपी बंद करनी है, बंद कर दो, कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता है। आपको आधे पैसों की जॉब मिल रही है, आप चले जाओ, बट एट लीस्ट डू व्हाट यू लव। At least you will enjoy what you're doing, and hopefully you'll make far more money in next 5 years because you're crazy about what you're doing, और फिर आप एसआईपी चालू कर लेंगे। These are all very fundamental things which we don't discuss. Somehow हमारा जो पूरा डिस्कशन बहुत सारे पॉडकास्ट और डिस्कशंस में goes around numbers and goes around the frivolous queries कि हम कितने फंड लें, कितने नहीं लें। But when I see people, around 80% of the people who I meet are not enjoying the work that they're doing.
But there is also an issue because they have family to feed, and people want luxury also, so they stick to that.
So I also believed in this. मैं हमेशा एक ही चीज़ बोलता हूँ कि ना, सैलरी का जो पेमेंट आता है ना, वो 30 दिन के बाद आता है, और 1 मिनट आपको मोबाइल पे जब वो ओटीपी नहीं, जो वो मैसेज आता है, यू सो मच क्रेडिट, वो 1 मिनट की खुशी मिलती है कि अरे बैंक में इतने पैसे आ गए, आई बिकम रिच अगेन। बट 30 दिन जो आप 8-8 घंटे काम कर रहे हो, 10 घंटे काम कर रहे हो, वो अगर आप एन्जॉय नहीं कर रहे हो ना, राइट? एंड इट कुड बी व्हाटएवर कॉन्टेक्स्ट, राइट? अ, देखो, एक चीज़ आपने और मैंने देखा, कोविड ने हमें सब सिखा दिया कि हमें खर्चे के लिए कितना चाहिए। अगर हमने दुनिया को शो ऑफ करने के लिए, आप जो बोल रहे हैं, बहुत हम इस रेस में फँसे हुए हैं कि व्हाट वुड अदर्स थिंक ऑफ मी? व्हाट वुड सोसाइटी थिंक ऑफ मी? व्हाट माय फ्रेंड्स विल थिंक ऑफ मी? राइट? आई थिंक वी आर लिविंग अ वेरी फेक लाइफ। तो ठीक है, आप शायद पैसे बना लोगे, बट डिड यू रियली एन्जॉय दैट लाइफ? डिड यू एन्जॉय the small moments? See, आज I love this work. I enjoy this. I'm passionate about this. And that's why for last 1 year, I've been coming on Sundays and working in my office. Nobody tells me, right? I love it. And if I'm loving what I'm doing, then I'll never retire. I'll not retire when I get 100 crores also. I'll not retire when I make 500 crores also. I'll not retire when I'm 65 also, because I'm enjoying. And finally, if any work can give you purpose of life, राइट, कि आपका पर्पस बन गया लाइफ का, तो फिर तो आप लाइफ लॉन्ग चलाओगे, यू विल बी मोर enthusiastic about it. So for me, these days, when I discuss these kind of issues with my investors, I ask them, are you happy what you're doing right now, or are you doing under compulsion? अगर आप compulsion में कर रहे हो, तो ठीक है, हम SIP का, I'll give you a very practical example. Last week, and this I think can be very meaningful to your viewers. Last week, imagine a couple comes to our office, both husband and wife working in good job. They actually came to increase their SIPs. They were doing some 90,000 SIP. They came to increase their SIPs. And they generally meet once a year with me, right? And when I had a discussion with them, couple of things came out in the conversation. They had one child. They were thinking of planning second child, but were worried ki, you know, that would mean a lot of cost. So I asked them, do you want to plan for second child, or you're not planning because of cost consideration? They were very honest. Sir, cost बहुत बढ़ जाएगा, इसलिए we want to give on this. But I said, अगर पैसे की प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती, तो would you plan? He said, for sure. So I kept that thought in mind. Second was wife. Yeah, I'm not happy with my job right now. It's a big four consulting firm, but it's very monotonous now. I'm not enjoying. I want to take a sabbatical. Can I take it? So I saw the position comfortable. They built a good corpus, 1.5 crore corpus. They're pretty young. So I think it's a great time to go for plan for maternity for a second child. Take a break. और आप 90,000 का भी एसआईपी करो, उसको हम 50,000 का कर देते हैं फ्रॉम योर हस्बैंड सैलरी। बाकी सब आप खर्चा करो, डोंट वरी ऑन दिस। आफ्टर 1-2 years, you are perfectly fine and want to come back to corporate, we'll start this thing. We redrew the entire financial plan and everything was working out perfectly, right? So I felt so happy after that conversation that people to add real meaning to their life. If they wanted to plan for kids, but money was coming their way, I made sure that money doesn't come in their way. So हम लोग बहुत बार क्या करते हैं, you know what happens is, if I leave this well-paying job, what will my friends think? What will my family say? अरे, तुम कुछ नहीं कर रहे हो, घर पे बैठे हो, 2 लाख की इनकम आ रही थी वहाँ से। And those are equal conversations. Not about returns, not about fund selection, not about whether you've created 10 crore corpus or 50 crore corpus. Because finally, what is money? It's a tool to help you you know, enjoy and find peace in what you do, right? And if money can give you that choice later on, yeah, you can do whatever you want with whom you want, right? That should be the end purpose of money, rather than trying to show off to others ki मैंने expensive घड़ी खरीदी है and all those things. Morgan also said so beautifully in it. For me, my only request to our viewers is have goal-based plans. Make sure that you are not compromising your present for the future. So this is the final message I would like to provide.
Oh, that is a lovely message. Thank you, Gajendra. It was pleasure interacting with you. Got answers to all of my questions. And if there is anything that you would like to say to viewers.
I think I really enjoyed this podcast. I think you ask some of the most sensible questions I can say, which I'm sure a lot of viewers would have these questions in mind. We had a very uh, transparent and engaging conversation. I tried to share whatever I knew and what I did in practice. But I just want to just leave with this thing. See, uh, you know, many people when they see our podcast, they want to copy you or me or whatever. But our situations are very different. Personal finance is more personal than finance. What has worked for me will not work for you, right? So don't blindly copy someone. This thing, each you can't compare your chapter 20 to my chapter 7. You had lived a different life. I had lived a different life. You were raised under different circumstances. You have different emotions with money. I have different emotions with money, right? Our professional background is different. But it's so easy to compare on social media and Instagram and by seeing these podcasts. यार ये गजेंद्र सर कर सकते हैं, बना सकते हैं, तो मैं भी कर सकता हूँ. And a lot of people have gone and bought these kind of investments after seeing my podcast. But uh, you know, when I would sell, I'll not be able to tell them. So my only thing is that don't blindly copy. Don't blindly copy what we say. Think if this is making sense to you, and uh, and then only try and act and follow one or two of the things that we would have discussed. But otherwise, I enjoyed the conversation. I didn't know it would go so well. Preparing for the first, but I did get a good time.
Same here. Thanks a lot. And thank you for that responsible message that you left. So thank you guys. Have a blessed day ahead. Bye bye.